Hello everyone, and welcome to Vlogmas Day 6. For today's video, our Faith Friday video, we are going to be listening to and responding to Joni Lamb, who is addressing the allegations that have been alleged against her and the network of Daystar by her son and daughter-in-law, Jonathan and Suzy Lamb. I did make a video about this incident last week, and the focus of that video was really about how to identify when a church or a Christian network or a Christian business is not operating in godly principles, and when there are some red flags and where there's cover up. And I was discussing how you can sort of look at how people are responding and reacting to one another, and you can determine if this is a place that's truly safe or if this is a place that you need to be mindful of, particularly in churches. I also discussed the fact that oftentimes when Christian companies, churches, organizations obtain insane amounts of money, and there's a lot of money involved, their morals often get, a little murky. And in this case, there was an allegation of SA, there's an allegation of spiritual abuse. Was the evidence of this on a recording from Julie Roy's. And so that part is really not an allegation. It's really like there was evidence. You could hear it, a 2-hour conversation that they had where that was evident. There was some cover up happening. And I discussed how in churches, oftentimes, and Christians, we think that we're protecting Christianity or we're protecting God by covering up when Christians sin against one another. And really that is detrimental. And it causes, this is one of the reasons why people, will say, oh, Christians are hypocrites, because we're afraid to call out sin. So I'm genuinely interested in what Joni has to say, because I'm curious what her perspective is. Above all, we should really be praying for healing for mostly Jonathan and Suzy's daughter, who has endured some really difficult things that no 5-year-old should have to endure. We're praying for healing. We're praying that God would restore her, that this incident would not affect her long term in the way that it can. We're praying for Jonathan and Suzy and Joni that they would be reconciled and that they would all do the right thing, even if that includes shutting down the Daystar network, even if that includes calling out the person who has allegedly done these things. That's what we are concerned about. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Joni, we wanted to kind of just gather around with you today. You're a TV personality all over the world. You're known for bringing news to the world, making people aware of issues that they need to know that can make their life a better life. Been amazing at that through the years.
There's no doubt that Joni and the Daystar Network have had a positive impact on the Christian community. No doubt. So I don't want to make it seem like everything that they've done is now thrown out the window. I think this is an opportunity for them to just be honest and to tell the truth. Because Christians are forgiving people until you start lying.
And we know there's stuff out there circulating and accusations that are coming from people that don't even know who you are, don't know you. And we, as your friends sitting here today, we have worked with you every day for years. We know you better than anybody out there that feels like they have the right to do what they're doing. So the girl.
This is true. And that's why I said before, we really don't know Joni. We don't know Jonathan and Suzy. So we really don't know these people. The people at her network know her. They may be clouded a little bit by the money, and by the power and fame and all that, but we really don't know her. They are 100% correct about that. And I always want to acknowledge that, because sometimes we see these stories and we just sort of jump to conclusions. And we make assumptions based on, yes, even myself, like based on what's in the video. But the reality is we don't know these people. Now we know what they've done, but we don't know them.
And I, we just wanted to sit with you today, and we wanted to ask you some of those questions that people are wanting answers. And so we just wanted to have our coffee and just ask you those questions.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. I have to pause it because I want to make sure that it's under fair use, fair use, fair use. I do have to pause it like every 30 seconds or so it's like so that I'm actually within the fair use clause.
And like Cindy said, there are those allegations out there from people who really don't know much about what's going on. One of the questions.
Clear. Okay, here it goes. And this is okay, you guys. The allegations are not from people that do not know her. The allegations are from her own children. Like, here comes the lie is happening already. The allegations are not from random people. They are people who also know her. So you guys have to have like wisdom. Listen to what she's saying. The allegations are purely coming from people who are in her circle, her inner circle, because they're her family. Her family started this, not random people on the internet.
When did you hear about the alleged abuse?
My first knowledge of any abuse was in November of 2020. And Suzy called me and said there had been an incident at my granddaughter's preschool. And she told me that something had happened where a little boy touched her and her friend.
So this is a lie, apparently. So this is where their stories do not align. Suzy said that her daughter told her it was a man. Suzy said it was taller than Daddy, which Jonathan Lamb's pretty tall. So maybe Joni is misremembering and she's sort of forgotten, but Suzy Lamb specifically said it was a man.
And so she called me and asked me, would I go to the school with her? And I said, absolutely. So I went with her to the school. We reported it to the school. And of course, I was there to encourage, and as I would for any child, but especially my granddaughter.
Of course, yes.
And so that was the incident that happened. And yet, what's being written is just taken out of context. That was the incident that happened in 2020, and I was there, and Suzy actually called me to go there.
Okay, so the word about you covering up, there's no truth to that.
When I started hearing that, I thought to myself, what am I covering up?
So Joni is misconstruing and conflating two separate incidences. So there was two incidences that Jonathan and Suzy Lamb were discussing. Number one, they discussed the incident at the school with a man, and then they discussed the incident at the family home. Then she discussed the incident with the chiropractor. So you guys, we have, I don't know if they're going to get into it. We're only 2 minutes in. We've got 34 minutes left. But there are three different incidences. And it doesn't seem like they're being entirely honest about which incidences were being covered up. And this is what I'm talking about when I say, you have to be brutally honest as Christians.
I've covered up nothing.
Right.
And so I never covered up anything. Now, there was another incident written about that was an incident that happened at our family retreat. This was in 2021. Okay. We were all staying in this house together. And again, we do that once a year. Mm-hmm. And my two older grandchildren were staying in an upstairs bedroom. And it was a long room, and there was a bunk bed on one side, and there was another bunk bed on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so my grandson was talking about that he had the city view, mm-hmm. and he was saying his sister had the beach view. Okay. And so one afternoon, he was talking about that, and who they call Pete was in the room holding a 1-year-old baby boy.
This is not the same story that Suzy and Jonathan Lamb told, by the way. I also get a little bit, wary when people start telling just innocuous details that are they just don't really matter. Get the point,
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so Pete says, oh, so you've got the city view, and everybody was talking about, well, I'd rather have the beach view, and my grandson saying, no, I like the city view. And Pete said, well, I like the city view too. And so he said, I want to see your city view. So they went up the stairs.
The grandson and Pete,
Yeah.
and Pete had the baby.
The grandson, Pete, and the baby.
Okay.
Now, all those details have been left out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing. This may have happened, and the other incident may have happened too. And this is where, again, like the actual, the investigation done by Julie's Roys is really important, because there needs to be, some deeper investigation into, because these things could have happened, and Pete could have followed their 5-year-old daughter upstairs while she was changing in her clothes, because that's not the story that Jonathan and Suzy Lamb told. So can you already see how, like, I don't know, I'm not loving this. I'm not loving this. Let's keep listening.
Exactly.
And so they went up the steps, and again, I was there. I heard this whole conversation.
Mhm.
And around the same time, or maybe just a few minutes after, I don't know exactly when, but my granddaughter went up to the room and went over to her side while Pete and the baby and my grandson were looking out the window at the city view.
Okay.
And she proceeded to put her bathing suit on. Well, about the time she started to put it on, Jonathan comes running up the stairs
Her dad.
and says, what are you doing in here while she's changing? What are you doing? And Pete was like, well, I'm sorry. I don't even know if he actually saw anything,
Because he had his back to her.
because he was holding the baby and the 8-year-old was there. So he said, I'm so sorry, and left. But there had been some very peculiar things that had happened at this particular trip. I remember when we were at the grocery store, our family there, because when we always go to the grocery store.
I don't know if, as a grown man, or even grown woman, myself being grown woman, that I would stay in a room where even a little girl began to start changing. I also don't know, like, Suzy and Jonathan Lamb don't strike me, this is pure speculation, guys, as a type of people that would, like, say, would have not told their daughter to change her clothes in separate rooms. Like, I feel like that's something that parents talk to their little girls about. Like, oh yeah, we, like, you change in the bathroom, or when there's a man around or a boy around, you change in a different room, especially given the previous incident. Like, doesn't make sense, because if her daughter was if that incident did indeed happen, her daughter was that traumatized, she would not have stayed, in my opinion, in my, experience. She would have, yeah, I don't know.
Get food for breakfast, that kind of thing. And I remember Suzy was standing in line, and she began to murmur under her breath and start talking about a man that was behind her. And she was getting angrier and angrier. And we were like, what's going on? And she, she said, he was looking at, in the store. And the man is, like, on his phone, not knowing what in the world she's saying or doing.
Here it comes. Okay, so guys, one of the hallmarks of narcissistic abuse, which I'm not calling her narcissist, but you know what I'm saying, is that they start to see how she's starting to make Suzy Lamb seem crazy. She's trying to make her seem crazy. And it's very possible that the man was looking at Suzy in the store, and then had the wherewithal to not do it in line. Like, it's very possible. But when you start sort of doing these things where you're trying to make someone look like they're crazy, and they're seeing things and they're hearing things, that's called a smear campaign. That is what people do. Like, you don't have to slander someone to tell the truth. And that's what's happening here.
We're just trying to calm her down. So it was just a weird dynamic that was going on with her from the beginning.
Right. I know that you called me from Florida and told me that it was a tough time as a family. And I know when families get together like that, a lot of times there are times that you disagree about things, or things happen.
Well, I mean, what happened was Marcus was alive. And so we just met together as a family. He talked to everyone. And clearly nothing happened.
Yeah.
Speaking of Pastor Marcus,
How did clearly nothing happen? What do you mean clearly nothing happened? What do you like that didn't really make sense.
first I want to say thanks for the opportunity. You've always been easy to talk to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just,
Very transparent.
very transparent. And so I want to ask you, because Suzy said that you and Pastor Marcus covered it up. Did you cover it up?
You know, Marcus isn't here, but I will just say absolutely a lie. I never covered it.
Okay. So here again, here you guys, this is why it's like really important to listen, to like get all the facts and read the article from Julie Roy's and then listen to the videos and listen to the audio. Suzy said that she covered up 2 incidences. They covered up the fact that their chiropractor was unlicensed, had allegations of sexual assault, and they still hired him. And he allegedly essayed Suzy. And when she went to Joni and Marcus, they covered it up. That was one instance that they covered up. So again, the conflation of all these things, it's how, maybe they didn't necessarily cover up the Pete situation because Pete's real, that incident didn't really happen, but they in fact did cover up and hired someone, a chiropractor for their green room, who had essay allegations and had lost his license. Even that itself is problematic.
Up anything. I wouldn't cover up anything. Marcus didn't cover up anything. And so again, this is a narrative that was written by some low-level blogger who knows nothing, never heard the other side of the story,
Yeah.
and is doing nothing but trying to destroy my family.
Sensationalize.
Yeah,
Well,
that's what she does.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you shared this, because I don't know why somebody would not have asked that question. Was there anybody else in the bedroom?
Right.
Her calling Julie Roy's a low-level blogger is, first of all, unbecoming of a Christian woman, but also just factually untrue. Julie Roy's has open investigations and has looked into so many church, Christian ministries, Christian organizations, and has exposed so many inconsistencies and hypocrisies. And they have turned out to be truthful. She's not someone who sensationalizes things. She also cares about her reputation. So she's not just going to put out a story that's completely false. That's just not who Julie Roy's is. And she does, investigate. So you guys have to remember that Julie Roy's found this out 9 months ago and just now reported it. It wasn't like a quick turnaround. She investigated and listened to audio and listened to hours and hours of footage and then put out the story. So it's not like it was some quick buck. And that's how she operates her investigation. So this idea that she's just some low-level blogger, that was such a low blow, but also kind of like on par for Joanie Lamb, to be honest, if you listen to the video.
Besides
All of that was left out.
all of it.
Holding a
And
baby,
that would have been to
8-year-old.
me.
Yes.
If you're investigating something or you're going to try
Good
to
one
find something,
facts.
Right.
well, it's a family retreat. So
Right.
Well, the crazy part is that eventually we worked through that misunderstanding, and Jonathan and Suzy ended up apologizing, and we prayed together. I mean, and it was a done deal.
Right.
And so the timing of later this coming out or being pulled up again out of the ashes when there's no validity to it just blew my mind. I'm like, what in the world?
Well, did you
Absolutely.
continue to do things as a family with Jonathan and Suzy and their family?
Oh, absolutely. No, this is the
So these questions that she's asking are leading questions. They're trying to paint this picture that everything was good. So one thing that you guys, if you're not in the Christian circle or world, is there's a lot of this like forgive, 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 forgive. And you're told to forgive and you still behave in loving ways, even if you have concerns. It's not really perceived as acceptable to sort of shun or cut someone off when they've done you wrong, when they've done something like this. You're supposed to, and you have to remember that Joni and Marcus are the breadwinners. They are the mavericks of this Christian network, and they are providing Jonathan and Suzy with their living. So it is in their best interest to not just, cut things off. And if you guys listen to the audio, the way that Joni sort of like uses scripture, and the Tommy Evans was like, she's the voice of God. Like, when you hear all that stuff and you submit to Joni, like, they were just submitting to Joni. That's exactly what they were doing. This is why little God theology is so problematic, because you start doing things that a typical person wouldn't do. You start submitting to people that you have no business submitting to. You start looking at people as being godlike and Christ-like, who you have no business looking at as godlike and Christ-like. It is 100% spiritual manipulation. And so they're like, yes, well, they still hung out with us. How many of you guys have, for the sake of peace, and I'm talking to you guys Christians especially, for the sake of not being ostracized and demonized, have stayed around somewhere you shouldn't? Right? How many of you guys, before you knew better, have said yes to things that you shouldn't have said yes to? So I wouldn't take them hanging out and being everything when you've been brainwashed to forgive. Joni is the voice of God. You submit to Joni. You submit to this network. This is in our contract. I wouldn't be like, that's not a legitimate reason to say that things were okay or that these things didn't happen. It's not a legitimate enough excuse.
So this was 2021, and Marcus passed away and was graduated to heaven in November of 2021. So when 2022 rolled around, the question was, are we going to do our family retreat? When the kids asked me about it, I said, I just don't know if I'm up for it, guys. And so, but we all got together, and they just said, no, Mom, we really want to do this. So I said yes. We went, Jonathan, Suzy, their kids, and the other couple, their kid. And when we got to the house, everybody will pick their room, and there were bunk beds that were outside Pete's room. And Jonathan and Suzy say, oh, well, the kids sleep here. So there was no thought of anything.
Yeah.
Hold on. If there are bunk beds in a common area, that is the safest place to put a kid. If I'm hearing her correctly, that is the safest place, because they're not in a room, they are in a public area. Just making a note of that. I could be wrong but if they're outside of the room, that means they're in a common area.
That there would be any issue. And Pete actually came to me and said, this is uncomfortable for me,
Because of what happened.
because he
last
didn't
year.
want that to be repeated.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so I said, well, no, we don't need to put the kids here. So I put them on the same floor with their parents. Everything was great. Nothing happened. And again, you think this issue is settled. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
this is all after the fact, after the incident. So
Yeah, the one incident that happened was 2020 with her preschool.
Yeah.
And somehow it evolved into blaming a family member. Because, people say, well, how can you protect a family member over? I would never protect anyone
No,
over my
you would not.
granddaughter.
That's
You would
not who
not.
you
I mean,
are.
that is insane, for people to say, oh, she's terrible. I would never put the ministry before family. I
No.
never have done
You and
that.
Marcus never did. And
So those are just
Debatable by hiring someone to come in as a chiropractor who in fact, it's been proven is, his license has been revoked because of SA allegations, for you to continue to, and they had someone in the room with them, everyone who was around. So just, I don't know that you wouldn't put the ministry before your family. I don't know. That's not something that we can confidently say is true.
conceptions, again, by the low-level blogger who does nothing but be used in a way that is trying to hurt the kingdom of
Right.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to know the
Yes,
truth.
absolutely. We know who the enemy is.
Yeah, and one of the other issues that's out there among debate is the marriage between you and Doug after Marcus passed away.
Right.
As I understand, John and Suzy said they struggled with that.
Mhm.
But I remember when initially the day and the engagement, they were especially Suzy was very excited.
Oh, very excited. From the very
and
beginning.
wanted
Yeah.
pictures. Was it so excited?
I mean, I have so many texts of her being excited, and early on, when I found out Doug had gone through a divorce, after that, I was to make that clear.
Yeah.
After
Right.
I didn't start talking to Doug Weiss until he was divorced. We started talking, and more like friends, and then later began to develop into something.
Yeah.
And we talked for hours, and I asked a million questions.
So did we.
But you did. And what people don't know is that I actually brought people that I trust, that I said, hey, I want you to walk with me through this. And if you see anything, I told you, Cindy, you and Darius, I said, if you see anything, it's a red flag, I want you to tell me. Same thing with you. And several other ministers, and of course, my minister friend there in Tennessee.
Yes.
Also, my dear friend, I'm just going to say everybody's name, but who again has been in ministry for 40 years. And we just began to walk through that process. One of the things that all of y'all said to me, you said to me, is just slow down.
Yeah.
And because you need to take time, and that's what I did. And we
Well, we
both
would
did.
ask
We slowed down.
questions
Yeah.
to you.
So her allegation, the point that she's making about Suzy Lamb and Jonathan Lamb being excited for her and all that, the point is that she's trying to make is that they had no, issues, and now they're all of a sudden having issues with it. Well, according to John and Suzy Lamb, they didn't know the history of Doug and his ex-wife. They didn't know. So they were under the false pretense, potentially, that Doug had divorced his wife biblically. They were under that pretense. And so, of course, they're going to be excited. But then after Julie Royce came out with her report, then they realized, not after Julie Royce came out with her report, after they did investigating on their own, they realized that maybe things were not as copacetic as they thought. So we oftentimes are excited about someone because we don't know them, because we don't know their history. And again, to make it seem like, well, people can't find information out or change their mind is silly.
We would talk, and I know you would talk with probably several, but if there was ever a question about something, I was like, well, you might consider this, or you might consider that. It wasn't like we were yes people, like whatever.
Because it was an adjustment for all of
that way
us.
at
Yeah.
all.
Well, I mean, and that's what a lot of people say, that my friends are yes people.
No.
My friends are not yes people.
No.
Count me out.
So, and your friends wanted to see you happy. They did not want to help
Now
you.
that
But
is
getting back to, I remember distinctively at this table, Suzy was so excited about
Yeah.
you
Yes.
and Doug.
Well, she was excited. And again, she was wonderful through that process early on. She thought it was great. She was so happy for me. She knew I was
Yes.
happy.
And
She told me,
didn't
I
Doug
think
ask-
he's the perfect person for you, to be with. And then in
Joni,
December,
didn't Doug ask Jonathan's permission?
in December,
Yeah.
Doug asked Jonathan out to breakfast because he wanted to get his blessing before he proposed. And Jonathan asked him a million questions and then gave his blessing. So, I mean, everything's going along. I have to say, my girls, they were still, because there had been gone a year.
Yes.
And so, or by that time, over a year, and they were still missing him. They were still grieving, to some degree. But I knew in time they would come around because they wanted me to be happy as
Of
well.
course.
So
And you bought, I believe I remember correctly, you bought a very nice custom suit for Jonathan because he was
I
going to
did.
walk you down the aisle.
Oh my gosh, don't do this. Don't do this. This is so bad. And you bought him a suit? Well, of course you did. Of course you did. Of course you bought him a suit. That's what you should do. Like it's a wedding. Of course. I don't know what else you would do. Like but you see how they're throwing in these pleasantries, these niceties that any normal human being would do. Of course, you're going to buy a suit. It's a wedding, but that wasn't some extra thing that she did to make her seem like she's this like really loving mom. You guys, I can't with this. I cannot. Okay.
Yes.
These are all the stories I tell you guys.
We're
So
very excited about that.
I took him to get a really nice suit. He was
Yeah.
excited about walking me down. And my granddaughter was going to be a flower girl. Bought her a beautiful
He
dress.
was excited.
She was very excited.
And then what happened?
Well, I would say probably around March or April of 2023. We were going to be married in June of 2023.
Right.
Is when everything started to shift. But what happened, people don't know, is that I told Suzy and the kids that I got married, that I would use Doug to co-host with me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Doug has a seminary degree. He's a licensed psychologist. He's been in ministry for years. And
He's a seasoned television
well,
presenter.
and we just had, a little season of kids with me, but it wasn't Joni and one of the kids. It was always Marcus and Joni. So it was
Okay, before I move on, I want to read this from the Roy's report regarding her marriage to Doug Weiss. So this is from the Julie Rose report. According to Jonathan and Suzy, none of Joni's kids or their spouses agreed with Joni's marriage to Weiss. Doug Weiss. They all believed Weiss lacked biblical grounds for divorcing his wife and that by marrying him, Joni was committing adultery. So in Christian circles, if you marry someone who has been divorced unbiblically, you're committing adultery because that person should have never been divorced. And Joni never condoned divorce until she met Doug Weiss. Just 2 months before the wedding, a longtime friend of Daystar, Denise Boggs of Living Waters Ministry, wrote an impassioned letter to Joni's family urging them to intervene. Boggs not only knew Joni well, but had also counseled Doug Weiss and Lisa Weiss just prior to their divorce. Boggs wrote that she had voiced concerns about Weiss to Joni, but she refused to hear me. Now Boggs said Joni was under a spirit of deception due to Weiss's influence. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing, Boggs wrote. He is of no caliber for such a high platform. She added, Joni didn't endorse divorce until she came under his deception. Using the Daystar platform, the enemy has successfully mocked the marriage covenant using one of the strongest Christian TV networks in the nation. So what I want to read is the impassioned letter. Dear Lamb family, it is with a heavy heart that I write this letter. I met with Joni before the baby shower this past week. I was so alarmed as I listened to her talk. It was as if I didn't know her. It appears as though she has come under a spirit of deception. Now, my brand of Christianity doesn't really believe a spirit of deception is a real thing, but I get what she's trying to say. She shared something Doug said to her that was so degrading for a woman of God, but she laughed as she told me. She seemed flattered by it, which was not the Joni Lamb I once knew. If you give into seductive flattery, you are being seduced and deceived. In spiritual warfare, you know the enemy by what the demonic spirit produces. A spirit of deception produces deception in the person who is under attack. A spirit of deception operates through flattery to first gain access. A man will use flattery to find the weak area in the soul of a woman. I think she's talking about Doug Weiss here. The flattery gives the enemy full access to your weakest area. I voiced my concerns about Joni and Doug at the very, very beginning when they first started dating, but she refused to hear me and defended him. This was when I became alarmed, and I knew she had come under the spirit of deception. The things I warned her about were things she once voiced strong convictions about. When a person is under deception, they begin to change right before your eyes, and it's as if you don't know them anymore. They say things they would have never said before. This is why I want to voice my concerns for Daystar. This is an attack. Marcus and Joni set such a high standard for Daystar over the years that the viewers will not be fooled. They will be able to see the deception. As viewers begin to see the change in Joni, they will know something is off and viewing will drop drastically. They have been under the anointing of Marcus Lamb for many years, so they won't be deceived and they will know something is wrong. The Daystar family has been under the leadership of Marcus Lamb, who stood for truth and righteousness. The Lord has shown me that what the enemy is using Doug to do. If Joni falls for it and hands over leadership to Doug, the Daystar viewing audience will see clear this deception. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing. My perspective of Doug came after spending several days with him. I voiced to her that the issues in the first marriage needed to be confronted before going into this marriage. Your mom agreed and they would hear me out first, but once Evans fully approved of Doug, she told me that they would not be interested in talking to me. After spending 3 days with Doug, I am fully aware of the deep-rooted issue that caused Doug's marriage to fail. The alarming thing is what took the first marriage down is casually being embraced. When I met with your mom on Friday before the shower, she rehearsed all the people's names again that were endorsing the marriage to Doug. Since I know the root issues, I see warning signs that others don't see. Jimmy Evans knows Doug, according to what Doug wants him to know. Blah, 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 blah. So Denise apparently has some information. She counseled Doug. She counseled Doug before his divorce. And so she knows what's going on behind the scenes, and she vehemently rejected and refused to endorse this marriage. Okay, let's continue.
It was a husband and wife. Mm-hmm. Of course, they would have continued to be a part, host when I wasn't there, and probably. Yeah. So, but when Suzy found out that's when the turn started, and then she pulled Jonathan into it, and then kind of there were rumblings with all the kids, like, well, maybe mom should slow down, or maybe and it was just like a 180 from what it had been. And
so another thing that mothers tend to do, who are, and I hate to say this, but they always blame the daughter-in-law for like what their son is deciding. And it's like, Jonathan is a grown man who made his own decisions. And as Jonathan and Suzy pointed out, they sent this information to Julie Royce way before this transition happened. So was it coincidental in timing? Yes. But it doesn't necessarily mean that was the reason why they decided to come out with this. They actually came out with this information earlier. They didn't know it was going to take 9 months for Julie Royce to investigate and to talk to everyone before she put this information out there. So this is a little bit of misconstruing of the timeline of events. And mostly because Joni Lamb, bless her heart, didn't know that they had already sent information to Julie Royce well before this.
And so I just thought, well, Lord, I stayed with the counsel of you guys and of other ministers, seasoned ministers. And I knew that the Lord had brought this man into my life. I knew that I was going to get married in June. And so I just continued on. And of course, the kids did come to the wedding. My brother walked me down the aisle. Yes. Mm-hmm. And that ended up being a blessing because my dad would have done it had he been alive.
Why are Jonathan and Suzy doing this? What's the reason for all this?
Well, the reason is clear. They did not want someone else coming in and taking their place. But the truth is, Doug didn't take anybody's place.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Marcus had left strict.
If that were true, they probably wouldn't have left. Like if this was really all about the money, they probably wouldn't have left, because they could have just sucked it up and they could have like gotten lawyers involved and said that this was in the contract. This is what Marcus said. They could have done that. But it's hard to believe that they just wanted to be in position of power, because actually, if they wanted to, they probably would have acquiesced and submitted as Doug, as Jimmy Evans said, and just did what she wanted to do. but to put yourself through this stress and expose this kind of essay just to get a position of power doesn't make sense. And anybody who knows and understands, the trauma that comes with essay knows this.
Instructions that if anything ever happened to him, that I would be president of Daystar. And a lot of people are saying, well, Marcus intended for Jonathan to be the president. Marcus never intended for Jonathan to be the president while I was alive or while he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
He had hoped, and he used an analogy all the time. He said, when your mom and I are gone, it would be my hope that Jonathan could lead with the girls beside him, and use the analogy of Moses
Holding up
with
the
Aaron and her holding up the arms, and he wanted the three of them to work together. He said it over and
I
over.
can hear that, yeah.
But what happened was when Doug came into the picture, there was something underneath there that I had never seen before that came to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked because I had always had a great relationship with everybody. And so what happened was we got back from our honeymoon. It was in July. And by the way, there are questions about, it's all over the internet, that Daystar paid $100,000.
Yeah, getting ready to ask you about that.
So absolutely not. Not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon, paid for our honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's another lie that's out there.
Right.
And so, but when we got back and we're doing the program, everything seemed okay. But there was a viewer comment that came in and said, hey, enjoying Dr. Doug hosting with Joni. Love the song she wrote, No Fear. Congratulations, something like that. And then there was other viewer feedback comment. You remember that day
I do.
because you were there.
Yeah.
And so the producer comes running in the middle of a show, which again, you want continuity. And the presence of God is so important when you're doing these programs live, and you've got to be in unity. And she came running back in and she said, they refused to read the card. And I was like,
So
what?
Jonathan and Suzy.
Jonathan and Suzy refused to read the card. And Suzy, I think, threw the card and stomped off the set. They told me. I was just like, what in the world?
They did not want to say something good about Doug. Is that what
They
it
did
was?
not want to read the viewer comment because they had done a 180 and all of a sudden decided that I was out of the.
Okay, so you have to go listen to the audio of this whole incident. Look on Julie Royce's YouTube, Julie, and then ROYS. Look at her YouTube because she has an audio of this entire incident. Yes, this is entirely true. She did not want to read the card, and this is what started this whole issue.
About it, and that I shouldn't have married Doug, et cetera, et cetera. But that was what was so bizarre because they knew the process that I went through. They knew the people that I surrounded myself with,
Right.
and they were all for it. And Jonathan gave his blessing.
Yeah.
So I just said, cut him from the show because at that point you could feel in the atmosphere.
Yes.
And that's when it all began. And if you had told me back then that they were capable of doing what they're doing right now, I would never believe it because I love my son and I love Suzy. I love my grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And I know more than anything, it would break the heart of Marcus Lamb. And the fact that they would tarnish
Yes.
their dad's name, or that Jonathan would tarnish his dad's name, is just shocking to
It's
me.
shocking.
And
I think that's something that's broke my heart is to see the family situation.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking as a mom, as a grandmother,
Yeah.
and that it breaks my heart that it's put out there for all the world to see the pain or the things that you go through as a family.
we tried to handle it privately.
Yeah.
And we tried for restoration, we tried for resolution, we tried for mediation, and to no avail. We would get something worked out with Jonathan, and then he would go home to Suzy and then come back different.
So listen to this. I want you to be mindful of the slandering because you don't have to do this to prove your point. This is something that you need to be looking out for when someone is not always necessarily in integrity or telling the truth. They're always blaming another person. And especially with mothers and their sons. Oh, she's doing this and she's blaming Suzy, but her son is a grown man. He's an individual man. We don't know that it's because of Suzy. We don't know that, but just this behavior alone, the fact that she's trying to tarnish, her daughter-in-law. And it's very interesting because she's careful not to say that Jonathan's done anything wrong. She's always blaming her daughter. That tells you something about this kind of woman anyway. That tells you something.
And, our board saw that, and people in positions of authority would see that. And again, we were just scratching our head like, how do we fix this? Because it was such a mess. And so we met with Jimmy Evans, myself, and the two of them, and we had exhausted so many avenues of trying to work it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a meeting, it's a private meeting. And
However, it was taped, which to me heard the meeting was fine, but to do that secretly
Yes.
What do
and
you
make
mean
that,
tape?
hey,
Explain
I
it.
guess recorded.
Jonathan
So it's-
secretly recorded
So
the
that
meeting.
to me is deceptive.
He knew privately, yeah.
And you, if I were recording, I would go.
Wait a minute. To me, the meeting was fine. The meeting had a lot of spiritual and unbiblical commands and demands that are antithetical to scripture. So I would not call that meeting okay. I thought that meeting was a little bit off center in terms of Christian values and what the Bible actually preaches. So yeah.
Go into the meeting knowing what I'm saying is going to be said. So I think I would probably, in my own flesh, edit my words, maybe not
yes.
say exactly what I'm thinking, or respond the way that I would had I not been recording.
Well, he was secretly recording. Of course, we
Right.
didn't know it.
Mhm.
But I will just say on the record, I don't regret
Mhm.
anything that I said. Because again, we were talking about, Jimmy was trying to explain about, God's order,
Yes,
of
authority.
submission. And when someone is called into an office as the president of a network, that if you can't submit to that authority, you remove yourself from it.
Mhm.
You know,
And Joni, that would be true if this was CBS, Fox News, IBM, any other corporation. You would not go in and the president and expect to remain in that company.
well, then a lot of people talk about, the voice of God analogy that was
Right.
used because,
Yes, that's what I wanted to know.
yeah, the voice since I am not,
Since when you became the voice of God?
I am not the voice of God.
Please.
But what Jimmy was saying is that I am the voice of authority
Yes.
at Daystar.
Yes.
He wasn't saying I was the voice of God.
Yeah.
Okay. And anybody in ministry
Would
would understand that. And I've had hundreds of people tell me, I was thinking this, but I listened to tape and I'm like, wow, I see exactly what went on there. But of course, what he meant was I was the voice here.
I've always operated with such humility. So when I heard, the voice of God, I'm like, I've never seen that about you.
No.
I mean, honestly, you've operated with humility.
Okay. If you go listen to that tape, he said it. He stood 10 toes down on his analogy that she was the voice of God. He said, I am the voice of God. She is the voice of God, and you need to listen to her. There was no. So here's the exact quote. Jonathan asked, so I can't hear from God. I have to hear from her. Jimmy Evans responded, outside of Daystar, what she says is God in Daystar. This is the voice of God in Daystar. There's no issue there. There's no confusion. He said what he said. Okay. He said what he said. And that is wrong. That is wrong. Use the word authority.
And so it was shocking. So I'm glad you clarified that.
Well, and I never thought I would be here. I really thought Marcus would live another 20 to 25 years.
Of course.
And so that was the most difficult storm I ever went through, was losing him.
Mhm.
And I would say that what I'm going through right now is the second most difficult storm, because there's nothing that pulls at your heartstrings more
As a mother.
than your own child.
Yes.
And I believe God will turn that around. I don't know how, when, where. There's so much damage that's been done. But the fact that I'm even having to talk about this publicly.
Exactly.
I know
It
there's,
doesn't have God lit. He is
Yeah.
still trolling.
I think Cindy mentioned at one point that no family is perfect, and no family is perfect.
Right.
But what I know for sure is that you've always loved your family. I mean, you've always considered daughters as daughters. I mean,
Daughters in love.
I was shocked to hear that all this had been happening, because you never ever talked bad about anything about your family. I mean, we've been on walks, we've been out, we've done. I was just so shocked, and I understand why the world is so shocked by all this, because here I come, every week, and I didn't know anything was going on as far as all the details and everything that's out there. And you know what? I don't want to know all those details, because I have lived a life.
It is called the Christian culture of cover-up. So when people don't know, there is this thing in dysfunctional families and Christian cults where you everything behind the scene, right? So they didn't know about the chiropractor. They didn't know about the allegations from the chiropractor. Should they have known? I would argue that yes. I would argue that transparency in those instances actually makes people trust you. So of course she didn't know, because in Christian cover-up culture, you don't share the truth. You simply you lie. You lie. And you will hear more about that on that recording.
Live their public life. Ex-husband, 3 Super Bowl wins. I've been in media, I've been in all that. There's nothing good that comes from it.
Yeah.
And so I just, continue to pray that, this could have been worked out privately instead of publicly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And we have all said, is the character of Joni Lamb. We know her character. We know her ability to love. But while we're
But
talking,
Joni Lamb is not perfect. Let's make sure we
Of
make
course not.
that. Certainly not perfect.
not perfect, but wonderful.
yeah.
But parts wrong.
And you would not, I know you in your heart would not want to have to address this in this manner, that
No.
you're having to respond
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
And
you know,
one
it's out
side
there.
that team talks about one side seems right until you hear the other side.
Right.
Sure.
And I just keep
you know, when I hear things
encouraging
like,
people
you know, she
here.
covered things up, or she
Yes.
hurt her granddaughter, or she didn't stand, like, that part tears in my heart because it's not true.
Exactly.
Or when things are being said about Marcus that he covered things up and he's not here to defend himself. And I can tell you, Marcus Lamb would never cover up anything. And he had
So what I want to say about this is a lot of people, because they feel like they're doing the right thing, they don't have conviction about it, right? And so we have honestly, we have to give grace for that, because in a lot of Christian churches, and I talked about this in my last video, in Christian circles, whoever has scandals, they really do think that they're doing the right thing by not talking about it. They really do think that they're doing the right thing by covering it up, by sweeping it under the rug. They genuinely do. They think they're protecting their congregation. They think they're protecting Christianity. And that's why she can sit up here and say this, because she genuinely believes that she's doing the right thing.
adored his granddaughter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He would have done anything to protect her. He knew about the 2020 incident. He knew I went to the school. And this other incident is a totally separate incident that has been given a narrative that is completely false.
So, Joni, what's up with this NDA whole thing? What's that all about?
Well, an NDA is something that Marcus started that process. He actually talked to an attorney friend about writing something up because Daystar had gotten so big and there was, you know, business proprietary information that you want to keep private.
And NDA stands for non-disclosure
Agreement, right.
So for those,
But I have to understand that they're saying that we were trying to get him to sign an NDA so that they wouldn't share this information that we didn't want to share. That's a complete lie. There was no information to share. And you can share any kind of information that is wrong. I mean, you work in HR,
Right.
some kind of sexual abuse or something.
Absolutely.
And so the NDA was for business reasons. And Marcus had started that process and I just carried it on through.
Because there were
That's
other,
not uncommon, is it?
HR.
No, I mean, it just depends on the organization. But one thing that I truly was that got my attention, it was about a PIP. So did you fire Jonathan without putting him on a performance plan?
No.
Because that sounded, when I heard about that, and I think a friend of mine just texted, it just sounded really cold and harsh.
Mhm.
Like, did you fire without saying, okay, a performance improvement plan, we'll lay everything out. We want you here. This is what we expect of you, et cetera.
Well, what happened is I came back and with a team of people and we met with every employee.
Okay, let me talk about the NDA situation. I know people who have worked at higher levels in technology, really, really high levels of technology, government agencies. They sign NDAs. Your average corporation not having you sign an NDA. Like that's just a fact. People who work at Apple, unless they're working in the higher regions, they know things that that people shouldn't know in terms of like what products are coming out, what technology is being used. They sign NDAs. Maybe not NDAs, just in their contract. Most people working for corporations are not signing NDAs. They're simply not. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a misnomer that this is common. It depends on the sphere that you're in.
And I had Doug in the meeting with me because we wanted to solidify the fact that I'm president of Daystar,
Mhm.
that he's not in any capacity of leading Daystar or on the board or anything else. He's
Or
here
trying to.
he co-hosts with me on TV. He's an incredible blessing to me. He has his own business that still operates an amazing counseling center in Colorado Springs.
Mhm.
And so Arnold, who used to be over the department, told him, you need to go find out what's going on. And so
And Arnold what is his title?
he's the COO.
Okay.
And so he went into the prayer department and found out a lot of stuff that was going on. And we actually removed those departments from Jonathan's leadership because he was not managing them properly. We found out that there were department heads that came to him and said, this is going on, please do this. And Jonathan didn't believe it and didn't deal with it. I lost some really good prayer partners and leaders in the prayer department. So we knew, and Arnold just told me not to move him from over the prayer department and these other. And so we put all of that back in order. And so once I found out that this was going on, I called partners that I lost. And they said, we'll come back. They all came back and they're still there. And so it was tough to make decisions, but it was for the betterment of Daystar. And the leadership
Those
here,
were the departments that Jonathan was over.
right, he was over several departments. Those were 3 that he was over that we removed to get him back in order. And so we met and decided we would put Jonathan on a PIP agreement, which, that's a performance improvement plan. You work in HR, so you know about that.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I want to say about this is that 2 things can be true. Jonathan can both have been a terrible employee and be telling the truth. So we have to remember that because that someone is not good at their job does not make them a liar. That someone is not proficient in work does not make them a liar. It simply makes them not good at their job, but they can still very much be truth tellers. So let's be careful.
Laid out specific, this is what you need to do to improve, and just a managerial style and making the right decision. You got 300 employees, obviously I can't micromanage every employee, but everyone knows here that I care about our employees and they need to be treated, with dignity. And so,
That
you
is
work
true.
here.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
so we put him on that, the PIP, and we had someone that was over him that kept up with his hours. He would come in and they'd be gone for 3-hour lunches, wouldn't tell anybody where he was, didn't really meet with the departments that he was over. And it just completely did not perform at all. And a little did I know that there was something else where they were plotting and planning something to try to hurt me, to try to hurt Daystar, which again is shocking. I would have never thought that would have happened.
Right.
Yeah, can I ask though about back to the NDA? Were there other employees that did the NDA as well here?
Oh yeah, all the department heads, the family that would have knowledge of business.
So it wasn't just him; it was
Oh,
other
no,
people's
no,
over.
including me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
We
so-
did that with our, so it's very common practice.
How long was it before, like, apparently now that I'm aware and have gained so much knowledge, there's a timeline involved. I mean, was he a year ago? I mean, how long was he employed before he was fired? Or what's the date he was actually fired or received the PIP?
Well, he was on, I don't remember if it was a 6-month or a 9-month PIP agreement. And that was up on November the 15th.
Okay.
And I had been advised before that we need to go ahead and let him go. But I said, no, just wait, let's see. I kept hoping things could change.
Right.
And so when it was up, that's when this blogger came with questions, questioning our integrity, talking about a cover up and sexual abuse and all this crazy stuff. And that's when we let him go. But it was because the PIP agreement was up and he had favorably. So I tried to say, well, because this blogger, had questions, then y'all let me go. No, they admitted they had been working with for months.
Well, Joni, how about the fact that he's now said that he was supposed to be president and has made an issue of that on some of these
It's just like I said earlier, Marcus never intended for him to be president while I was alive. And we had conversations, Marcus and I did, and he told me, our kids are not ready. And if anything were to happen to me, and I said, nothing is going to happen to you.
Right.
And he said, but if it did, if I passed before you, you would have to run Daystar.
Okay.
And he actually followed up with an email and sent to the board and all the family exactly, what would happen if he ever, if he went to be with the Lord before me. But I never dreamed in a million years that he would.
We did, yes.
You
None of
know,
us did.
when I look around the table, I see we're all mothers, we're all grandmothers.
Yes.
Your daughter, your wife, your mother-in-law. I mean, you're so many things to people, but you're human. And I understand that. I understand, and I know what pain we all know what pain feels
Yes.
like. But how are you?
I want to acknowledge that this is probably very painful. Like nobody wants their family business aired into public. I don't, this, however, biblically, if something is wrong and you go to them in private and if someone is sinning against you and you go to them in private and they don't do anything about it, then you're to go to 2 or 3 people. And if they don't do anything about it, you're supposed to call out publicly. So I do want to acknowledge that this must be very, very difficult. It must be very, very challenging for Joni Lamb.
Handling all this.
I mean, it's been difficult. I put my happy face on and come to work. But yeah, I go home and in her tears, there are moments I'm really sad because I love my son.
Yeah.
I love my daughter-in-law. I love my grandkids. They put me in an impossible situation. And I'm just sorry that we even have to sit here and talk about this.
But I do want to say thank you. Thank you for letting us have this time with you. It's not easy, but you,
Yes.
friends and besties that love you and appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And you knew a lot of the story because we had many early morning calls. You as well.
We are praying for your entire family, for Daystar.
Yes.
That
Yes.
the truth will prevail.
Amen.
I know that God is
Yeah.
fighting this battle for you. Our battle is not against flesh.
Right.
And we're praying for Jonathan and Suzy and their
absolutely
family
we are,
because
of course.
I know how much you love them.
Yes.
And our heart would be restoration.
Well, and
And
two,
it's
you've got family members involved here, and
Yeah.
to know that someone is innocent and is being accused, it's a hard thing. And at the same time, I've got a granddaughter that I adore. But again, if you don't know the whole story,
Right.
you can't understand the dynamics here. So hopefully, at least I appreciate you asking me these hard questions, and hopefully this can help.
This is how to
All right, so that's that. Overall, I do think that Joni Land brought up some good points. I think if there's details missing, we need to know this. I wish there were like Ring cameras in the house, and then you could, you know, we would have video of this, not of the rooms, but of like, you know, people following the girl upstairs. At this point, it's he said, she said, and he said, and his word against my word. But I do hope that at the very least, Joan looks at herself and reflects on herself and goes, you know what? I said some things that were completely out of line scripturally and spiritually. And I would have edited myself. No, baby, that's who you are. How you talk behind doors is who you are. When you thought that meeting wasn't being recorded, that's who you are. And I know that she's got to be a little bit embarrassed about that. But I think that's why it's important to like really root out your own heart and to root out your own sin. Because one thing that we talked about in our class last night, our discipleship class last night, is whatever comes out when you are angry is who you are. So you have to ask God to really ask God to search your heart, get out any wicked way in you, because when these things happen, you don't want to be on the side of what Joni Lamb and Tommy Evans are saying. You really don't want to be saying those things. And you don't want to come off the same way. You want to be able to respond with grace and kindness and truth and to have convictions. So anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I did not come on camera today. I'm sorry, but I will be on next week. All right, you guys, have a wonderful day. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.